Lambert, the Director of Thriving Leaders at Grace College and Seminary. We want to welcome all of our staff and faculty members that are here live with us in room 147 at the seminary, as well as we want to thank all of those that are viewing on YouTube. Thank you for taking the time out of your morning to join us this morning for a great presentation with Phil Cooke. I first encountered Phil Cooke when I began using his book, Unique, for a few college courses I was teaching years ago, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading the books, began to look at some more material from Phil Cooke, began to look at some articles, some things on his website, and over the years just really enjoyed his material, as well as our dean, Dr. Freddie Cardoza, encountered him at the Innovation Conference at Biola University a few years ago, and I believe Phil Cooke was maybe the moderator at that event. And so Dr. Freddie Cardoza has mentioned great things about Phil as well. And so we are just blessed today to have Phil with us via Zoom. I know he recently flew in from the East Coast, so he's trying to wake up this morning. So we're thankful that he's able to be with us, even though he mentioned to me he might be a little bit groggy. But I want to share just a little bit about Phil Cooke, and I don't want to take any more time, and I want to dive right in and let Phil Cooke speak to us. He's a media producer, writer, speaker, coach. Phil Cooke works at the intersection of faith and media and culture, and he's pretty rare, a working producer in Hollywood with a PhD in theology. His client list includes studios and networks like Walt Disney, DreamWorks, USA Network, as well as major Christian organizations such as the Museum of the Bible, Salvation Army, YouVersion Bible app, and more. He's produced TV and film programming in more than 60 countries around the world, and in the process been shot at, survived 2 military coups, fallen out of a helicopter, and been threatened with prison. And during that time, through his company, Cooke Media Group in Burbank, California, Phil has helped some of the largest churches, ministries, and non-for-profit organizations in the world use media to tell their story in changing a disrupted culture. Executive producer of Hillsong, Let Hope Rise, released to theaters nationwide. He also produced The Insanity of God, a feature documentary that premiered nationally as Fathom Event. Most recently, he produced episode 5 of the feature documentary for television, Inexplicable: The Rise of Christianity in Asia. He's appeared on NBC, MSNBC, CNBC, CNN, Fox News, and his work has been profiled in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, and the Wall Street Journal. He's also lectured at universities like Yale, University of California, at Berkeley, and also UCLA. And so with no further ado, I'd like to welcome Phil Cooke.
Well, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here. This is really, really fun. It's early for me, but it's fun. And like you say, I got in late last night, flying in. So tell me how you want to move forward with this. Should I just ramble a little bit? You want to ask me some questions? What do you prefer?
Sure. Why don't you just some things maybe I missed of telling about your background and what you're doing, and then I'll dive right into some questions.
Sure, that sounds great. We have a company in Burbank, California, in Los Angeles called Cooke Media Group. And primarily, I mean, we've done Super Bowl commercials, television, and all kind of things, but primarily we have a real heart to help the church tell their story in this media-driven culture we live in. I find that literally people are being overwhelmed with media choices, particularly with the advent of social media. It's kind of funny that I just think the digital revolution that we're experiencing is so much greater than the print revolution, than anything that's happened in the past. I just think it's a remarkable time to be alive, and it's impacting so many areas of life, from academia to music to the legal world, just medicine. It's just impacting everything. It's not just an entertainment thing. And I think as Christians, we need to have a voice in that conversation, and we need to learn to speak that language, or I'm worried that we're going to lose our impact in the culture at all. It's interesting that we keep getting marginalized in our culture today as Christians, and I think part of that is because we don't speak the language of the culture, which is media. And I think a lot of it has to do with this, of course. I find people are more obsessed with their phones than ever. It's kind of funny. I was looking through YouTube the other day, and you can find tons of videos in YouTube, just security camera shots, other people's shots of people so obsessed with their phone, so focused on their phone, they literally fall into ditches, get hit by cars, walk into fountains. We were filming a project in Berlin a few years ago before COVID, And we actually watched a guy who was so focused on his phone, he walked right into a canal. And you can just see that all the time. And it's just an amazing reflection in our culture. I saw a study recently that indicated when we meet a colleague for lunch and we set the phone on the table, our IQ drops. Just the fact that the phone is there, we may never touch it, may never overtly look at it, but just the fact that the phone is there is a distraction. It's making us wonder, should I check my email? Should I check my text messages? So it's just interesting how obsessed we've gotten with the phone, and it's kind of a reflection of the media world in general. One UK study I outline in my book talks about the fact that the average person sees about 10,000 media messages every single day. I mean, literally, we're being overwhelmed in media messages. And I often tell pastors, it's interesting that you may have your congregation for an hour a week, maybe 2 hours a week, maybe at the most 3 hours a week. But people are seeing 10,000 media messages every single day. So we wonder why we're losing the battle of influence. One study indicated that even in this computer world we live in, televisions are still on an enormous amount of time. The average home in America, the last statistic I read, the television is on 8 hours and 18 minutes a day. I mean, think about that. The National Sleep Study Center says we're sleeping just a little more than 6 hours a day. But in the average home in America today, the television is on 8 hours and 18 minutes. I'm guilty. I travel an enormous amount every year. And I would just walk into a hotel room, check into a room, turn on the TV, no intention of watching it, and just have it on, just for room noise. And I started to realize the impact that was having on my life years ago, and I just turned it off to the point where I was at a hotel for 3 days this week in Atlanta, and I didn't turn the TV on one time. We're just being so overwhelmed, we don't know how to deal with it and understand it. So I think that's a big concern of mine, how we teach the church to use media wisely and more effectively, because I do think that that's where people today get their news, that's where they get their relationships. And of course, social media has a negative side. I don't want to ramble on this, but social media has a negative side. We're seeing a huge spike in suicides. We're seeing a spike in mental health problems that all are triggered by TikTok, by Instagram, by social media platforms like that. So I think it's a concern, and we need to really understand how to deal with it and really know. So we primarily work with churches, ministry organizations, helping them understand that. I have a particular heart to help pastors really navigate that world. And the book that you mentioned, Maximize Your Influence, I really wrote during the pandemic to help pastors navigate this world. I thought, when the church lockdown started a couple years ago, I thought we'd be out of business because churches there's no need for them to call us anymore, and certainly they wouldn't be able to afford it. But the opposite happened. We got flooded with calls from pastors wanting to know how we do this live streaming thing. How do we maximize that? So I wrote the book in the middle of all that. I wrote the book to really help pastors and leaders of nonprofit organizations, churches, ministries navigate this digital world we live in. So that's kind of who I am and what we do. And like you say, I've been all over the world doing it, and it's kind of interesting.
Thank you, Phil. And I do want to remind everybody, right now we do have people from the Charis Collective watching. We've got students, we've got faculty, we've got staff, we've got pastors across our community that are engaged watching right now. And so, Phil, this is just going to be great content for everybody involved to help them in their ministries. A question I have, Phil, is I'm looking at your academic background, and it's pretty extensive. And I think it's something, Phil, that I knew you, but I didn't know this. And so tell us just a little bit about your academic background.
Well, I'm a preacher's kid. Grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was a track star and a gymnast, and I got a lot of scholarships, athletic scholarships to University of North Carolina, North Carolina State, but I chose Oral Roberts University in Tulsa, Oklahoma to go. My grandmother had been a big follower of Oral, and that was back when he was doing his big primetime television specials, and they had it was the largest Christian university in the country at the time. And so I went to Tulsa and enrolled at ORU. I thought I'd be a piano major because I was a preacher's kid, so back in those days, a requirement of being a preacher's kid is you have to learn to play the piano. And I had no idea what I would do with my life. I started as a music major until I met the faculty and realized they were serious, so I got out of there pretty quick. But I had made movies as a kid. This is a funny thing. I made movies as a kid. In high school, I had 3 or 4 buddies, and we took my dad's Super 8 movie camera in those days, had little 3-minute film reels, and we made mafia movies, army movies, space movies, war movies, all kind of movies, just little shorts. And we had a blast doing it. Never crossed my mind you could do this for a living. So when I went away to college, I thought, well, maybe I'll find some buddies that would like to make some films out there. And so I took my camera, took some of my films, and literally the day I was unpacking my suitcase in the dorm, very first day, a couple of the films fell out of the suitcase, and a guy across the hall said, hey, I'm taking a film editing class. I can show you how to edit those things together. I had no clue you could actually cut film. And so that night, he took me down to the film department, showed me around. We were working on my little movie, and the professor happened to be there working on a project of his own late at night. And as he was leaving, he stopped by, introduced himself to me, and said, I'm the film professor here. And he said, I've been watching your little movie over your shoulder. And he said, I've got students that have been taking it for 2 or 3 years, and they're still not as good as this. He said, would you mind if I showed your movie in my class tomorrow? So I said, sure, if I could sit in. And so I did. The next day, I sat in the back row of the film class. They showed my little movie, and trust me, it was nothing to scream about. But when it was over, they started talking about it. They started discussing my little movie. And I'll tell you, this thought occurred to me. I had this crystal clear moment of revelation that I don't think I've had before or since, that essentially said, this thought was, if I can do something with a camera that makes people talk like this is what I'm supposed to do with my life. And I literally changed my major to film and television that day, communication arts, and I never looked back. I graduated, started working about 10 years after my undergrad work. I went back to the University of Oklahoma and got a master's in journalism because I was really focusing on writing. I wanted to do a lot of writing, and I got my master's in journalism. And then 10 years later, I got a PhD in theology. I never had any designs to teach. I never thought I was going to be a professor. But first of all, I love going to class, and I'm fascinated with theology. And of course, since most of our clients are churches and ministry organizations, I love speaking that language. And so I decided to do it. I did my dissertation on the movie The Shawshank Redemption, which kind of freaked out my dissertation committee. But I got an A, so I was good. And so that's kind of where I've been. I'm a nut about classes. I just love school. I love the university setting. And maybe one of these days I'll end up teaching, who knows.
Thank you, Phil. Phil, here's a question for you. Why have churches and ministry organizations generally lagged behind when it comes to using media to share our faith?
It's a great question. And I'll tell you something interesting that most people don't realize, and that is about, the very invention and the birth of the movie business between about 1898 and about 1914, the church actually made more films than Hollywood. The church embraced filmmaking early on in a really, really significant way. I was consulting with a church, an African-American church across the river from New York City, and it was actually Henry Emerson Fosdick's church. He built it in he pastored there in 1911, I think. Beautiful, traditional cathedral church stone. It was magnificent, and it was an incredible church. And an African-American congregation had taken it maybe 20 years ago. They called me up and asked me if I'd come and help them with some things. And the interesting thing about the church was that they started to do some remodeling in the sanctuary. And when they cut a hole in the back wall, they discovered a massive 35 millimeter film projector just boarded up in the wall. And it was huge. It was an incredible piece of equipment. 35 millimeter theatrical movie projector. And they did some research, and they found out in the 1910, 1915, 1920, about that period, every Saturday night was movie night at the church. And they would show evangelistic movies. They would show Christian movies to people in the community. Would come in and they'd show these big movies because it was super successful. And then when the war broke out in the early 40s, they kind of cut that back. And they got to a place where they decided to quit doing it altogether in the 50s. And I was told that instead of going to all the trouble of trying to pull the projector out, they just boarded it up and sealed the wall in and left it in there for all of those years. So it is interesting that early on, churches really embraced it. But what's funny is that as the movie business kind of got much more profane, more sexual attitudes started getting involved in movies, and people it started moving much more in probably in a negative way, churches kind of backed up. And the problem is when you leave something, you leave a void, and other forces will rush in, and we've seen that certainly happen in Hollywood. But I also think when it comes to radio, television, so many other things, the pioneers of Christian radio, Christian television weren't producers. They weren't creative people like me. They were pastors. They were teachers. They were people that felt the call of God to use the media. People like Billy Graham, people like Oral Roberts, Fulton Sheen on the Catholic side, and there were others even earlier. And they didn't know anything about production. They didn't know anything about how to make an interesting program. They just thought, hey, I can use this tool of radio to preach the gospel, or I can use this tool of television to share a message of hope. And so they were driving the force. So their message was great, but in most cases, but the production quality, the structure of the program, the entertainment value, the things that would make people intrigued and want to watch, they just weren't there. So early Christian media, early Christian radio and television in particular was horribly boring and very cheesy in many ways. But it's really because I have great admiration for those pastors and leaders that seize that moment. They seize those tools. They didn't know how to make it an interesting program, but they thought, hey, I can use this to preach the gospel. So I have great admiration for that. And over the years, we've seen more creative people, more behind the scenes people come up in the church. And we've seen the quality rise quite a bit. There's still a few holdouts that I'm working with out there to try to make their show a little more engaging and compelling. But for the most part, I think it was because it was pastors and ministry leaders that really drove Christian media for so long. And that's a big reason why it just didn't have those entertaining elements to it, or those compelling elements that would make people want to watch, even though the message might have been really good. So that's my opinion, at least. And I think we have a long way to go, but we're doing some really interesting things out there right now.
Phil, right along those lines, right now, what do you think the church can do to change that? What are some things actually happening that people are going to be wanting to watch Christian/church media?
Well, the pandemic taught us a lot. The church lockdown taught us an enormous amount. As I said, I thought I'd be out of business, but lo and behold, I've been flooded with calls. I did a 4-hour training session with 200 pastors across Russia on Zoom, helping them with their live stream. About a year ago, I've taught 150 pastors in South America, 60 Portuguese-speaking pastors in Brazil, Angola, and Portugal. And I even did a session with 50 pastors here in the U.S. that in the middle of the shutdown, in the middle of the lockdown, they were launching churches 100% online. So we did some interesting work with those guys. I think what's happening out there today is really interesting. If you look back over the Grammy Awards, the awards every year for the best music, over and over and over for so many years, people have accepted their Grammy Award. They come up to accept their Grammy Award for music, and very often they'll say, I got my start preaching, or I got my start singing in church. That's almost common here in Hollywood. And I just think in the future, when the Oscars come around, when it's time for the Academy Awards, we're going to see a generation of people that accept the Best Director Award, the Best Producer Award, and who will say, hey, I got my start in church media. I think churches are really embracing the media in a very, very powerful way. Doesn't mean you have to have thousands of members and, 4, 5, 6 cameras. You can do some remarkably simple things and actually do them very, very well. The stories I've gotten during the shutdown have been remarkable. Obviously, it's funny, and here's the interesting thing, by the way, and that is long before the pandemic, long before COVID, we've been working with churches, helping them maximize their live stream. And we've had remarkable results. We had, I think, as many as 3 churches that we work with were making as much as a third of their total income just from their live stream audience. I had one large church pastor in South Carolina called me right before COVID, in the summer before COVID, and said to tell me that Sunday, his live stream audience actually gave more than his 6,000 member congregation. So we discovered some things, and the reason that happens is because we treat that audience seriously. I mean, certainly it may not, my highest goal is to get people in the church. The fellowship thing matters, the face-to-face worship matters. Those things are important. However, there's going to be a lot of people that just don't do that for a lot of reasons. My wife and I travel about 250,000 miles a year. But wherever we are in the world on Sunday, we'll pop open the laptop and watch our home church back here in LA on the live stream. And you think about the college students that are away at college, you might want to check in on your church back home. And so I think there's so many reasons we need to maximize the live stream. I often tell people that I love going to football games. I mean, it's an amazing experience. The energy, the excitement of the crowd, it's live, you see things for real. But at the same time, when I'm watching a game at home, there are things that I can engage with that I don't see at the stadium. I can see, background stories on players. I can see more statistics. I can see more updates and special reports on television that I can't see in the stadium. So my goal is to help churches create what I would call a hybrid experience. Let's maximize the live experience. Let's maximize the online experience so that however people engage with your church, your university, your classes, whatever you do, I want that to be as good as it possibly can be and as compelling and powerful as it possibly can be. So we've just learned a lot. It's funny, I had a church of about 900 members, an African-American church in the South, call me about 6 months into the shutdown, and the pastors, I've known him for many, many years, and the pastor said, Phil, before the shutdown, we had 28 subscribers to our YouTube channel. He said, now we have 23,000. He said, so far, 1.5 million people have watched my Easter message on YouTube. And he said, we're averaging 30 to 40,000 viewers every week on our live stream. That's at a 900-member church. He said, I feel guilty saying this because I'm a pastor, but I have no desire to go back to the building. He said, we're making more of an impact online than we've ever made before. And of course, he was joking, but I got it. I understood that if we embrace it and we really maximize the tools that we have, we can really do some remarkable things. And by the way, let me say that you don't have to have a lot of equipment. It might be interesting for you to know that there are 2 film festivals, feature film festivals in America right now for movies, feature films shot on iPhones. And the quality is just so amazing now. I mean, when I started in this business, a camera cost $250,000. And it was horrible quality compared to what you see on an iPhone now. And so I have a director of photography, a camera operator, a woman that we've worked with before, that her whole business is built around filming on an iPhone. She has all these fancy rigs and stuff that she uses, and it's just really quite remarkable. So I tell pastors, don't tell me you don't have the budget. Don't tell me you don't have the equipment. If you're carrying a phone in your pocket, you've got the equipment and you know how to use it. So I think that's a really critical thing. The question is, what are we doing with that tool, and how are we connecting with the audience? Because I think that's so incredibly, incredibly important.
Phil, I want to go right along with what you just said. I pastored for several years, and when internet first came out and different digital pieces first came out, pastors, we thought, we're not really sure if we want to engage in this, because if we start doing this, then people won't attend live services. There's still some of that out there, and I certainly understand the engagement of that live interaction as a pastor. I want people in the sanctuary. I want to minister to them live. You shared a story there about one pastor. He saw much more attendance engaging on the online platform. In general, what are you seeing with attitudes of church leaders and pastors along these lines?
Well, it's interesting. You're right. You're exactly right. A lot of pastors have before the pandemic, it's kind of funny, you can look at the world, BC and AD, before the pandemic and after the pandemic, because before, I had a lot of pastors tell me, Phil, I don't mind live streaming my services, but that's not real ministry. Well, let me tell you, when the church lockdown happened, that changed their tune dramatically. And a lot of them never really saw the potential. They would hang a camera on the balcony rail or something and shoot this giant wide shot of the whole building. It just wasn't very effective, and so I understand that. But what is interesting is, before the pandemic, I have never seen, and we've been working with churches and their live stream for many years, and I've never seen one church lose members because of their live stream. The live stream, in almost every case, allows them to be seen by people all over the world. I mean, I think pastors realized this during the pandemic. They were getting audiences from around the world. You could track what countries these people are coming from online, and it's just, I think it opened up a lot of pastors' eyes. Now, I will say this, post-pandemic, and I think this is really an important issue, I do think that a significant number of people probably, it's not that they won't come back at all, but I think a significant number of people will probably cut back 1 or 2 Sundays a month. The truth is, this is a situation where with the pandemic, we went for months and months and months 100% at home, watching church at home. We couldn't go to church at all. And people, I think, human nature being what it is, I think people got into that habit. And you can sit there eating breakfast and watch church. You can sit there reading a magazine and watch church. You can sit there in your pajamas and watch church with your kids running around and going crazy. So I think people kind of got used to that. And I think we're going to see some cutbacks. But I think I'm already starting to see that's already reversing. People are coming back pretty well. Now, in the Black community in America, I'm seeing less, that they're more cautious about coming back. But with mostly white churches, Hispanic churches, other Asian churches, I'm seeing some really good numbers of people coming back. But as I say, I'll tell you what's, I don't know if you want to go into this, but what's most interesting to me about this is this whole pandemic has caused pastors to completely rethink church. I mean, completely rethink church. I mean, I've had so many pastors tell me, Phil, we've done church virtually the same way for 200 years. I mean, it's gone way even further. Maybe we changed the order of service. Maybe we changed the style of music we sing. Maybe we changed the length of my sermon. But church has pretty much been the same thing for at least our lifetime and far more than that. And I'm seeing a lot of churches really start to rethink church completely. I'll give you a couple of great examples. For instance, one church I know, it's I don't know, maybe a couple thousand members, so it's a fairly large church. They're going to continue, even when all the mandates are lifted, everything's gone, they're going to continue live streaming for 3 Sundays a month. Then on the 4th Sunday, they're going to have a worship, kind of a concert event on Friday night at the church. On Saturday, they're going to take the congregation into the streets to minister to people, homeless people, drug addicts. They have a big ministry for that. And then on Sunday, they're going to have a huge worship service in their church, but they're only going to do that one weekend. So they've taken over the whole weekend, that 4th weekend, but then the other 3 Sundays, they're going to continue doing it online. A number of other pastors are I'm seeing them experiment with a Catholic daily mass kind of model. You know, Catholics have daily smaller services every day in their church. And I have a friend who's a Broadway actor, and he tours the country on Broadway. He's Catholic, and he tells me whatever city I'm in, I can find a local Catholic church, and I can get up early in the morning and go to a local mass. And I'm seeing a lot of pastors doing that online. For instance, Steve Agalis at Destiny Worship Center in Destin, Florida, started doing a morning Bible study, Bible teaching session on Facebook. And he has 300 or 400 people every morning, Monday through Friday, that'll join him for that little session. And then over the rest of the day, it's, you know, you can access it and play it back anytime you want, and he'll get 3,000 or 4,000 people watching it over the course of the day. But he started that, and he's going to continue that into the future. Another pastor I met has done communion online literally every day for 400 and something days so far. So it's just interesting to me that pastors are rethinking, they're using this opportunity to rethink what church could be like and what church should be like. And I think it's positive. You may not agree with a lot of those ideas or a lot of those choices those pastors are making, but I just encourage people. And I'll tell you what, this is an interesting thing to think about. I wrote a book years ago called Jolt, to get the jump on a world that's constantly changing. And I wrote it because I saw this period of accelerated change happening in the culture. And I wanted to help people. The more research I did, the more study I did, the more I realized people hate change. I mean, if you're involved, I'm sure at a university it's the same way. And if you're involved in a church, you know people just hate to change. In fact, I saw one study that indicated that open heart surgery patients, a significant number of open heart surgery patients within 2 years go back to their old lifestyle. You know, smoking, eating fried food, drinking, whatever got into that heart attack in the first place. So the threat of death doesn't make a lot of people change. So I discovered in that book, people really hate to change. Now, one thing that's interesting about the pandemic is since the beginning of the lockdowns, all we've heard on the evening news, all we've heard in TV talk shows, all we've heard in the paper is there's going to be a new normal. When this is over, things are going to be different. Things are going to change. So we as a country, and in fact the world, has had that pounded into our head day after day after day for the last 2 years, which means, I'm getting to a point here, which means that I think right now, people in your church, people at your university, people in your nonprofit, whatever you do, I don't think they're just going to be able to handle change. I think they're expecting change to happen. I think as we come out of this COVID thing, as we emerge from this, people are expecting significant changes to happen. So I tell pastors, for instance, whatever you want to change, and I know every pastor in America wants to change something. Maybe it's the color of the carpet, maybe it's the paint, maybe it's the order of service, maybe changing the leadership team, maybe it's changing the logo, the look, the brand, whatever about your church. Whatever it is, I believe this is the moment to do it. And I would say that to anybody who's listening, whether you're a teacher, a real estate agent, a coach, whatever, a business executive. I'll tell you right now, I think we're in a window where people are more open to change than they probably will be at any other time in our life. And I think that window will probably close in a matter of months. So I just am encouraging people, whatever you want to change about your business, your church, your nonprofit, this is the moment to do it. And I think people will be more open to it. They'll expect it, and I think you'll have greater results. Didn't mean to go into that long, drug out detail, but I just think that's really, really important right now.
No, Phil, I'm greatly appreciative on your explanation. Phil, I want to try to put you on the spot here just a little bit. Phil, let's say that we take you and we put you into a strategic planning meeting of a church. Because right now, I think if churches haven't, they're behind. They need to really do some strategic planning, rethinking things months ago. But let's say that we've got a strategic planning meeting, a church board. They're trying to figure out what to do next. What's three things that you would tell them you really need to focus in on right now?
Well, number one, I would tell them to prioritize communication. I think, it's so interesting. Pastors, ministry leaders, nonprofit leaders, don't think twice about having an attorney on retainer. They don't think twice about having an accountant on retainer. But let me tell you, we live in a digital generation, and we need to be thinking about prioritizing communication. The role of communication director, in my view, these days, is probably the second most important role in any church or nonprofit organization, because the pastor's job is to get that message to the people in the congregation. A communication director will help take that message to the world. So I think prioritizing communication in an era where so many people are getting their information online through social media, short films, short videos, I think that would be a super high priority for me. Another thing I would say kind of similar to that is, as a leader, I'm encouraging pastors, university leaders, business leaders to learn to lead creative people. One of the great frustrations I find in the Christian world today is we don't lead creative people well. I've been in so many situations at churches around the country where the pastor, the CEO, the president, the leader may be a great leader, but they're used to working with salespeople or marketing people or accounting people or financial people or ministry people. They just really don't understand what makes creative people tick. And it's not that creative people are weird at all. It's not like herding cats. It's more like herding tigers. They're amazing what they can do when they're unleashed. But you just have to think in terms of how a creative person works. For instance, a couple of really quick tips is a creative person needs a certain amount of stability to do great work. So often, the pastor or the leader will walk into a graphic designer's office and say, I'm just going to tell you, whatever you design, however you design this new logo, if it doesn't work, we're out of business. If it doesn't work, I'm gonna have to lay you off. Let me tell you, that is no way to lead creative people. That doesn't inspire them. They need a certain amount of stability. Now, they can handle challenge. And one of the great dirty little secrets of creative people that we don't like to share too much is we love deadlines. So many leaders are afraid to give a creative person a deadline, but the truth is that gives us our boundaries. That lets us know how to plan. I'm a creative person that I don't usually even start working on a project till I see the deadline in the distance coming forward. There's a joke out there, I think Dorothy Parker may have said it, but I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound they make as they fly by. But really, deadlines are important, and we need them. And so early on, I want to do that with creative people. And I think chemistry really matters with your creative team. Getting the right people. I would much rather have a less than perfect team who love working together than a team of geniuses who didn't play well together. So little things like that are vitally important for leading creative people. And the truth is, look at your organization today, whether you're a university or a business or a church. Think about it. All the things that deal with communication. You've got to deal with websites today. You've got to deal with social media today. You've got to deal with press releases today. You've got to deal with crisis communications. If something happens in a negative way, how do you deal with that? In the cancel culture world, all those are communication issues that we need to understand today. So I would say, prioritize communications, then learn to lead a creative team so they can really get the message out in a more inspired way. I think they're probably the two most critical things. If I was to say something else, it would probably be understand the power of social media. I think we've really only hit the tip of the iceberg with social media in so many ways. So many churches use social media as a megaphone. They just announcing the Christmas pageant coming up, announcing the Easter service, or announcing this. Social media is meant to be social. It's a two-way conversation. So if all we're doing is just announcing stuff and talking about how awesome we are, we're not, that's not a compelling social media presence. We need to create an environment where people want to engage with us. And I think that's really critical. And let me say one last thing, since you're on the church kick, about websites. This is so important. I just wish I could broadcast this to every church in America. Your church website is not for your church members. Let me make sure you understand that. I can tell you, your church members never go to your website. Hey, they know where the church is. They know who the pastor is. They know what time the services start. They know when the Easter play is coming up. They never visit your website. On the flip side, I can tell you that virtually 100% of new visitors will check you out online before they come visit. In this digital age, people want to check everything out. They check restaurants out before they visit, and they will check out your church online. So I'm telling pastors, it's time to redesign your church website to make it a compelling place that would give people a compelling reason to want to come and visit. I mean, in many ways, if that's the thing that triggers somebody to come and visit your church, that's in some ways the most important thing you could possibly do. So I always tell pastors, go back, rethink your church website. How does it look to a non-believer or somebody who's never visited your church before? And what on it would make them think, wow, that's an amazing experience. I need to come there. I need to be there on Sunday. So that's a little nugget I'm throwing out there. I just think that's really, really vital. Sorry, I go off on these tangents. I apologize. I get passionate about stuff.
No, Phil, I enjoy the tangent. Phil, you and I have talked in the past. One of our programs here at Grace College and Seminary is a program we called MAMS. It's the Masters of Arts in Ministry Studies Online. And one of our new concentrations is technology within that program, Phil. You and I have discussed that, and many of the things that you have said have resonated with us over the past couple years, that we wanted to take those creative, talented people and make an avenue for them to serve God, to serve Jesus in ministry with their tech abilities. And so we've designed this concentration to be able to do that. In fact, one of our courses, Phil, is how to train, lead tech/creative type of people, kind of what you were mentioning. And we may have to talk sometime, Phil, about that particular course. I'd love to hear what you have to say and your availabilities. So,
well, I love that. Let me tell you, I could not support that more. One of my great frustrations with Christian universities in general, particularly ones that have communication, film, video, multimedia departments, is that we're training directors to come to Hollywood. We're training people to come to Hollywood where they have about 0.00001 chance of actually succeeding. Now, I'm not against it. I live and work in Hollywood. I love the Christians that I know that are working in the industry trying to make a difference. However, it's really, really hard. It's very, very difficult. And many of them, after all that training, end up out here working at Starbucks. But I could probably tell you maybe 30 churches right now desperately looking for a communication director or a media director.
Yeah.
I could probably give you 5 or 7 churches producing a movie right now. I could probably give you 100 churches that have state-of-the-art video and television or video equipment in their church and are doing remarkable things. I think one of the greatest things we could do right now is create a generation of young people that have learned how that tech world works, that creative world works, to help the church get their story out there. I just can't express to you how important that is. I think pastors are getting it. They understand it. The problem is, I'm in a meeting every week or two with a pastor that's desperate to find somebody that will lead his media initiative or that will lead their communication outreach in the church. And so they're just hard to find. And so I don't know, honestly, I don't know of any university in America raising up communication directors for churches. And trust me, you'd get a job right after graduation. You'd get a job because there's so many churches looking for that role. So I think what you're talking about is a brilliant, brilliant idea, and I'm 100% behind it.
Thank you, Phil. There's so many things I want to ask you. I'm going to kind of whittle it down here because I want to make sure that I allow time for questions.
Okay.
I got 2 questions. One is, number one, Phil, let's say that we've got a college student listening, and they were in a similar situation as you as a college student. They want to serve God in some capacity, but you know what? I've got a desire for film and media and these type of things. What do you advise them to do?
Well, one of the reasons that I'm big on education, there's always that in the entertainment media industry, there's that debate about, do you go get a job and work your way up, or do you go to college first? And what we're seeing is an explosion of film schools out there across the country, both Christian and secular. And one of the reasons for that is, in a university setting, you get your hands on a camera right away. You start editing right away. You can write scripts right away. In the industry, if you come straight into the industry to get a job, you're going to be running sandwiches for 6 months. You're going to be getting coffee for the crew. You're going to be carrying out trash bags at the end of the day. Maybe you can watch what goes on. And I'm big on internships while you're in college, if you can possibly get an internship with a company. So you can learn by watching. But the truth is, they're never going to give you a camera. They're not going to trust you with a script. They're not going to let you do much of anything. And so a university experience, a college experience, and training experience helps you get your hands on cameras, lighting equipment, sound equipment. You actually start making films. And so most really high-level film schools that in the Christian space, and schools like Biola University, Regent, Oral Roberts, others, and now you guys emerging into this. I think the great thing about that, you will leave your college experience with multiple projects under your belt. You'll already produce short films. You'll produce television commercials. You'll produce advertising campaigns. So when you do go into the industry, you've got something to show. And that portfolio, that reel, is going to be so incredibly important. So I would encourage people, really give that college experience a real thought, because it's going to be so important to your development and kind of help you accelerate your career in many ways. Did that answer the question?
Yes, Phil, thank you. Also, Phil, we've got a lot of pastors listening to us and church planters. And here at Grace College and Seminary, through the Center for Thriving Leaders, that's one of our emphasis in the next few months, is focusing on church planting and helping in that capacity. With what we've been talking about, Phil, how could you encourage church planters today?
Well, I tell you, that's a powerful. Media is a powerful tool for church planting. I mean, first of all, I'm all for it. I think we need to have more planters out there doing that incredible work. It's like I said, I actually trained 50 church planters to plant churches 100% online until the mandates could be lifted and they could actually create a church. But I think, when you think about it, in the old days of planting churches, you moved to a city or a town, and you just went to the coffee shop and met people. You went to the diner and you met people. You developed relationships, and it was slow going. But now with social media, there's so many ways you can get connected with tens, hundreds, thousands, and more people through social media without ever crossing paths with them. And I think it's a great way to get the message out about what you're doing. Now, again, it's not about just broadcasting, we're planting in a church. It's about starting a conversation, starting an engagement. And the other thing I would say is, this is a little pet peeve of mine. Churches, I think, try to be all things to all people and try to reach everybody. The truth is, we can't. I mean, face it, Jesus never reached everybody. There were towns, that Jesus went to that people didn't listen to his message. So if Jesus can't get everybody's attention, we're not going to be able to. So I encourage churches, start thinking in terms of, what is your message as a pastor? What is your skill set as a pastor? Who are the people in your church? What is their skill set? What's their passion? What's their focus? Look at that really, really closely and start thinking about, okay, who could we reach? Who are the low-hanging fruit out there that would be perfect for the kind of experience we're offering on a Sunday or throughout the week? I think that's so important. Instead of trying to just make a bland message and throwing it out to everybody, let's start to focus and see what we can do. And I even kind of encourage that for large churches, because a friend of mine, I just wrote a blog post about Ken Foreman of a Cathedral of Faith in San Jose, right in the heart of Silicon Valley. He's got about a 4,000 or 5,000 member church, so it's a large church. But a number of years ago, the thought occurred to him, I don't really know what my congregation does for a living. I mean, I've never thought about asking what everybody does. So he did a survey. He actually sent out a survey, discovered he had something like 18 or 20 dentists in his church. So one night he invited them all over to his house and said, guys, what can we do? We got 18, 20 dentists. What do we do with that? That meeting launched what has now become the largest free dental clinic in the entire San Francisco Bay Area. And they don't just clean your teeth. They do full implants. They do everything, all free for poor homeless, drug addicts, whatever. They'll take anybody. And as a result, they've gotten written up in USA Today. USA TV networks sent us to do that's how I found out about it. They sent us to go up and do a story on it, to play on national television. They've got so much press, and their stock is so high in their city. The city can't do enough things for them. And it all came from the pastors wondering, what do people do? There's a similar church that I know, a smaller one in Vancouver, that found out they had about 10 hairstylists in their church. So now they do a homeless outreach once a month on a Saturday. They go into a homeless community and do makeovers for women. And they said, you have no idea how a woman's life can be transformed who's been homeless by just having a makeover. So it's just interesting to see what areas of your church, where do you rock? What, with your congregation, your skill set, your calling, what is that area you rock? And go out and really focus on that. If I was in a church, I would really hammer on that, because I think it's so. And one last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up. But there's a church here in I know here in LA that's filled with entertainment people, really high level, dedicated Christians, but who make movies and TV for a living. And the church keeps trying to get them to go to Mexico and build houses. And that's a great outreach. It's a great need. But all my friends at that church tell me, hey, I can make I produce $200 million movies for a living. I have no clue how to build a house. He said, I would fear for the person that had to live in a house that I built. And so, but the church doesn't recognize that, and they don't create some kind of an outreach that those guys would be amazing at doing. So I just am a big believer. Find out where the skill set is in your church. Find out where the calling is, the message, and what God's doing there, and really use that to amplify your outreach, and it can make a huge difference.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. I want to open it up now for our staff and faculty. If there's any questions that you would have for Phil, or insights, or maybe something that he said, or feel free to come on up. We'll capture you up here on the podium with the microphone. That way he can hear you, and we'll have it also copied. So, Phil, we just want to thank you again for being here. And then once those questions are finished, Phil, I have one last thing for you I want to ask you.
Uh-oh. All right, hit me.
So, hey, Phil, this is Freddie Cardoza. You were at Biola University for the Imagination Conference several years ago, and you were a star there. You're an absolute star. And whenever Trent and I began to talk, he said to me, he goes, I got this guy, Phil Cooke. I'm like, Phil Cooke? I'm like, that guy's a star, man. I said, could we get this guy? We started talking about, could we get this guy, right? And
I need to hire you to be my agent. That's what
I know, right?
Geez.
No, but I'm a true believer. Well, it's because, Phil, and I've said to our team here that you are one of the very few, like really futurists that is connected to technology, future, and the church that gets it. And you're not a hostile voice to the church or to the academy. You're a friendly voice, and so you don't talk down to it. And I'm sure everyone here feels like it's very refreshing the way you're helping us. I'm only asking my questions first because I feel that there may be others that want to think about theirs, but I certainly hope my team and others that are here would think about questions. And it may be that we have some questions that come online. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to go online to the live feed, it may be that you might see some live questions that come up from our audience online. Now, having said that, I've got two questions. I'm going to ask one and wait, and then because I'm going to view this later and take down notes. But I want to ask two questions back to back, and then I'll let some others. So one question is about online education. So my conviction is that, online education's been around, and there's been this gap, and we're getting ready to do more engaging online because we just received a really large second Lilly grant from the Lilly Endowment Foundation. So we're in it, but we're going to get in it deeper. And I'm sure you've been around and seen online education. And so what I would say is sometimes online education is done horribly. Sometimes it's done well, and other times it's not done at all. Let's say that you're doing online education well, and here's really the crux of my question. So you're doing online education well. You've got a decent camera. You got good pedagogy. You've got that. One of my questions though is especially from a creative like yourself. My guess is that someone that that looks at online classes, you're like, okay, I get it. You're doing a little clip here. We're doing some Q&A, a little discussion group, blah blah blah. I just know in my heart that you're like, okay, we could do so much more with this. We could go so much farther. My question to you is, if you could just help us think, even if you're like, okay, I've not really thought about that. Whatever you've got in your, from the hip is going to be better than I can probably think about in a long time. So what would you say are things we could do if we wanted to say, what does online education 2.0 look like? That's my question.
Well, I could go back and reflect on that for a month, probably. I do think that we've reached Zoom maximum peak. I think people are getting sick of Zoom. And I think it's more than just doing a Zoom call with a talking head. I do think that there's some interesting studies out there. For instance, I saw a study for the news business a couple of years ago that indicated people remember 3 times as much information when you put it in the form of graphics on the screen. So when you see CNN or Fox News or you see a football game, so much information is in graphic form on the screen. Mm-hmm. That's largely because studies have shown people remember 3 times as much. That's why I tell churches, if you do a local television program, put the scriptures on the screen, put the sermon points, put the key thoughts. Mm-hmm. So there are little things like that it does take more work, but it's important. I also am a big believer that as much as possible, do it in a location that reflects the subject you're talking about. So you just can't do a great online class from your bedroom or even from your classroom if it's just you sitting at a desk. I like to create some kind of environment where it reflects the subject you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I think also, you know what? I just like to coach some professors. I'd like to coach some. I direct actors for a living. That's great. And there's some things that make those actors much more compelling. What you'll find is that many of the actors in Hollywood are exceptionally boring human beings in person, but they know the techniques about how to come alive when that camera turns on. I would love to work with professors on that kind of thing. I think that would be really, really critical. So there's a number of things. I mean, I could go on for hours, but I think there are a number of things like that. I tend to want to think of, online education more documentary style, where you're illustrating things, using graphics exceptionally well, you're going out on location, things like that. That can make just a difference because you want it to be compelling. You just want it to be compelling, not just horribly boring. And most of online education is horribly, horribly boring. So, and also keep in mind that online audience is a hostile audience as far as I'm concerned. They're sitting at home, they've got the TV going, their kids are running around, their wife or husband is yelling at them. There's so many distractions out there that we need to do everything we can to kind of reach through that camera and grab them by the throat. And that's the key to making it really creative and intriguing. We take criticism. I take a lot of criticism for using the word entertaining, but the truth is, if it's not entertaining at some level, they're going to get bored and walk away. Mm-hmm. So I think how we engage with them is absolutely critical. So I don't know. I don't think I've said very much, but you've given me something to think about. Let me do that and get back to you because I do think it's you're onto something really important.
Well, I think those are already some good ideas. In fact, I've already got in my mind some things I'm going to probably start doing this week, but. And I'm not exaggerating, but I think that a mind like yours that understands so many of these fields, I think that you would do a tremendous service to the church. In fact, I think your book would be snatched up immediately if you were to apply your thinking to this and online. I mean, I think you'd have to create another division in your organization just to cover it because schools are literally they're desperate to find out. I mean, in my mind, that is the number one question. What is online 2.0? Because if you can capture that, you can cut through all the static and go to another level with these Me Next groups that are trying to finally get online. So thank you for that as a tip. I'm going to ask one more question. I'm going to ask others to cue their questions up, and Trent might have some too. The other quick question is, and this is not meant to, I'm always sort of preaching the technology thing, so there may be people in the room that are thinking I'm trying to nail them, and I'm not. But I want to just talk to you about technology as a phenomenon, right? And I'll just make a couple of assumptions and then get your take. And then after I ask the question, I'll step down. There was a time, Phil, that people thought, okay, that's nice. This is a nice little trend or a fad, all this neat little technology. Oh, people love their little gadgets. And I think now it's dawning on some people, some of us it dawned on, a decade ago, but there's people in our culture that are late adopters that say, maybe this technology thing has some staying power, So I think the question for me is a lot of times I wrote a chapter in a book called that discussed the idea of technophobia. And then there's also technolatry, like that is the idolatry of technology.
Right.
And you have to be careful about both extremes. But the thing is, we're a lot more concerned about the idolatry of technology sometimes and our phobia actually overcomes us. But then it's easy to use the idolatry piece as an excuse. You follow what I'm saying? So the question to you is if there were, let's say that most Christian communities are late adopters. There's some great examples of churches doing it right. There's some great examples of schools doing it right. But for the most part, people know because of the rate of change, almost everyone, including me, and I'm reasonably familiar with technology, but most people would say, I can't keep up. And some people say, I've not even gotten in the race. I mean, I'm just glad to have something besides a flip phone. Okay, so my question to you is there any encouragement you could give or direction or general advice to people that say, look, I'm so far behind, I'm crippled at a level that I'm out of the game and I'm now going to have to pretty much be a spectator on the sidelines. And what I would, my general conviction, I've said to even my team, if you think, hey, I'm 48 and, or I'm, for that matter, I'm 59 and I'm going to coast pretty much till retirement because, that's not my thing. The fact is, you're not going to survive in today's world, right, without being engaged in technology. So my question to you is, what advice could you give to late adopters or people who've been afraid to enter the fray as a word of encouragement to say that, look, you got to get in the game? Thanks again for your help.
Great question, and I would say that we were always late adopters. The Apostle Paul used the technology of his day, which was letters, to literally build the foundation of the early church. In the 1500s, Martin Luther, an obscure monk, really discovered the power of Gutenberg's press and turned that and used that to become the most popular author of his day. And it's interesting that he didn't just use the printing press. He followed Tyndale's advice, which was to make smaller versions of the book so everybody could carry it around. As you know, he wrote in German, which is the language of the people. But the most interesting thing to me about Luther is he, at the time, book covers were just the title of the book printed on a blank piece of paper. And he hired Lucas Cranach, who was the most famous artist of his day, to create artistic visual book covers. I mean, literally, Martin Luther transformed the publishing industry just because he had such brilliant ideas, and it changed it. And as a result, it literally did change the world. Even at the turn of the last century, the American Bible Society in Washington, D.C. had more state-of-the-art steam-driven printing presses than any publisher in America. They had, I think, 7 steam-driven printing presses, which were absolute state-of-the-art, more than any other major publisher in America. So up to a point, Christians have always been out there. And so I think, first of all, we need to stop just thinking that we're supposed to be slow getting into it, because in the past, people have been absolutely on the front lines. My good friend Bobby Grunewald at the YouVersion Bible app, they've got 500 million downloads of the Bible in that app online. So I would just encourage people that, look, it is not our place to step back and wait and see what happens. It's our place to, I'd rather you go in there and do some dumb things, make mistakes, than not do it at all. And you can start slow. Social media doesn't cost anything. A website is super cheap, if anything. Even short videos. And I have pastors that all day long, they're doing short little videos on their phone, posting them to social media, and they're generating a huge following. So, it is interesting that, if you're old as I am, a Canadian media theorist named Marshall McLuhan back in the 60s said the medium is the message. And the point of that was how you say it, what platform you say it on literally changes the message. So we can't just say what we said in the pulpit, put it in a book, and do a transcript for a book and expect that to work as the book, or turn that transcript into a TV show and expect that to work. We have to understand every medium is different, and we have to really apply the tools and the techniques to use that well. So I just would encourage people, it doesn't cost anything to try. Jump it, put your toe in the water. I think you'd be pleased. And maybe you'll find out social media is not right for you. Maybe you'll find out something else isn't. But the truth is, this whole internet thing is not going away. It is not going away. Every indication is we are going deeper and deeper and deeper. And so the good, the bad, the ugly, like every technology, I think is going to be around, and we need to be able to converse and talk in that language.
Thank you, Phil. I've got one last question, unless someone else has one here, but I think we'll be ending here, and I know your time is coming to an end here, Phil, with us. This word is even kind of archaic, Phil, but when I think of you, this word certainly comes to mind. And years of pastoring and collegiate education, this word can be divisive. Some pastors and churches accept this word, some do not. So I guess there's different definitions of it. And the word is relevance. Phil, unpack for you what the word relevant means for the church.
Well, for one thing, relevance isn't fancy lighting. It's not skinny jeans. Relevance isn't a gold medallion around your neck or trying to be hip and cool. We don't have to make Jesus relevant. Jesus is already relevant. We don't have to make the Bible relevant.
Amen.
It's already relevant. So I think that we've gone down the wrong road there, thinking that in some way, if we can hip up the gospel, if we can make it cooler looking or cooler sounding, it's going to help people accept it. I don't think that's the case at all. I think the gospel speaks to everybody in every culture and every time, and I think is an incredibly powerful message. Now, are there things we can do to make the presentation better? Yes. I think, you know what, if somebody walks away from the gospel because they can't handle what the gospel teaches, okay, I can dig that. That's going to happen. The Bible says that's going to happen. But if they walk away because of the bonehead way I presented it, or if they walk away because I got into a fight on social media with them about it, if they walk away because I did something stupid, I will have to answer for that. So I think it's more important that we understand how we present that timeless, relevant message matters. And we just need to do it in a way that's totally honest, totally real. And I think if we can do that and just put that message out there, it's already relevant, it's already real, it's great, it's powerful, it's life-changing. If we can do that, but the thing is, we need to get it out there. We do need to get it out there. I think, the clock is ticking, and on our the opportunity we have to get as many people into heaven as possible. And so I want to do everything I can to get the message out there. That's why I will always err on the side of probably using media, using other things, even if I make mistakes. I just feel this incredible urgency to get the message to as many people as possible. And I've heard such amazing, life-changing stories that would take me hours to share that make me realize we got to keep going. We got to keep doing this. And that's why I love what you guys are doing. I love the idea of sharing like this. It's so important. So I'd encourage you. Love what Grace is doing. I love how you're thinking. And so keep it up. Keep moving forward.
Phil, thank you so much for your time today. And based upon you and I's conversation earlier this morning, I want to be considerate of your time. I want to thank all of our Charis pastors listening today, all of our students, faculty, and staff who have taken time to just learn some things on the side of media and technology, ministry, online education. Phil, can't thank you enough. I look forward to future conversations and dialogue with you. Certainly be praying for you and your ministry and business in Hollywood. And thank you so much, Phil. And I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners today and participating with Grace College and Seminary's presentation and also connection with the Center for Thriving Leaders. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.